This evening we have a very special guest. For most everybody in the room here, he really doesn't need an introduction, but I'm going to give him one anyway. He is the senator from the 33rd Senatorial District. You know about his activities in the community. He's actively involved, lawyer sometimes. But more importantly than that, Gerald is involved in a lot of things in the community. One of the things that he's been involved in that the NAACP does not know and doesn't recognize. We had a bump in life memberships last year, a bump. And we had a bump primarily because Gerald Neal got all of the officers of side of the lake to become life members. So he does a lot of things behind the scenes that you don't learn about any of those things, but I think as a community we're appreciative of the things that he does do. My only thing was when I was reading local free media this morning, I don't know why he didn't punch Douglas out for his craziness last week. Crazy. But anyway, it's my privilege and pleasure to introduce you to Gerald Neal, a senator from the 33rd District. What I didn't tell you, he is the minority leader in the Senate. And you know, I think we're fortunate, even though we're not in a minority in there, the leadership in both the House and the Senate is African American folks, and something to be proud of. Thank you. With that, the floor is yours, Gerald.
So if I can be a little informal, I know we're going to tie and all this stuff. I'm going to just be a little informal. There's so much ground. First of all, thank you for the work that you do, because not everybody shows up, and the things that you do that people don't know about that you do is where the real work is being done, and you know what it takes to do that. So I want to congratulate you on that continued commitment. I want to get straight into it because I'm going to get hooked at a certain period of time. Y'all know Reagan, right? So I want to get into it. I want to focus on some things that I think are the most important things so far in the legislature that have taken place in terms of bills. And the three areas that I want to focus on are education, housing, and the budget. So I'm going to start with education for obvious reasons. There's a lot going on in this area, but I'm going to narrow this down to 3 bills because there's multiple bills. And I'm going to focus on Senate bills. Keep in mind that House bills are generated in the Senate and the House. And they come to the House, that's when I get serious about them, although we have people monitoring and moving the bills on the House to see their viability and whether they get to us or not. So this is very complex work when you deal with it. And you really have to be on top of it all the time. In fact, I've had 5 Zoom meetings today, and that's typical of what happens during the session. God bless Zoom. Some people hate it, I love it. So I'm gonna get right into it. First of all, back a cycle or 2 ago, the Senate filed a bill that basically is the same thing that they filed this time, which is Senate Bill 1. When they name a bill 1 through 10, that's a priority bill. So this is Senate Bill 1 I'm going to talk to you about. The Supreme Court ruled it unconstitutional. And of course, there's a side piece on that, because our new African-American justice, who came on the bench, was part of the vote that had it reconsidered, and therefore, boom, they changed that, making it constitutional to unconstitutional, and here they come back again with this bill here, okay? Basically what the court said was they didn't articulate the basis for this sufficient enough to meet constitutional standards. So they've come back and they've added all the reasons why they're doing it. We still don't think it meets constitutional standards, but it may. You never know in this situation. By the way, that that justice, you may already know, is under attack politically, and you know what that deal is. The impeachment piece. We'll see if it gets to us. You all know the impeachment process. Impeachment's like being indicted, and the Senate tries it. So I don't say things publicly, because I may talk myself out of it. being part of that process, so I'm gonna be careful there. Okay, so I'm gonna get right to Senate Bill 1. So Senate Bill 1 restructures JCPS. This bill is aimed just at Jefferson County. It is, that part of that constitutionality was associated with the fact that it really was, in effect, special legislation. So, but by reducing the authority is what they're trying to do. Reduce the authority of the locally elected school board and concentrating more power in the superintendent's office. Now, they simple-mindedly said, or they explained that, they said, well, it makes sense to do that. It's the superintendent makes all these decisions, and it's the superintendent that's driving these things. It's the superintendent that's educated and has experience to make these kinds of judgments. We need to give him more power, so he's not hampered by a board that comes in and people have all these different opinions, and sometimes they're driven by political inclinations or value systems that are skewed and have to come together and make some judgments together. So they try to simple-mindedly suggest that, well, if we streamline this and we concentrate this power in this individual, then we'll have a more effective school system. We get better outcomes than what we have in the school system. So I want to just abuse that suggestion on the front end. There is no research, there's no numbers anywhere that have been presented and have been located that suggest if you do that, you'll get a better outcome in the school system. In fact, if you go to larger school systems in various places in the United States of America, they're doing quite well, by the way, and they have larger boards, or sometimes smaller boards, or small boards, like ours is, but they are dealing with more complex systems, and they have democratically elected boards that's doing it, just like we have here in Jefferson County. So what they're talking about, there must be something else on their mind here. So we'll get to that. So elected school boards exist so parents and taxpayers have a direct voice in the education process. There is no magic in that process, by the way. But I will say, and it's not an easy process. I have to say that democracy is not easy. It's kind of messy. In fact, people run around bragging about how messy democracy is, and isn't that a good thing? Because that's what happens when people of different opinions come together and try to figure out how to come up with something that they can agree, here's what we're going to do. You know how that can be. So that actually is what we're talking about when we deal with this. So what they're trying to do is create a separate governance structure for JCPS, basically. A county school district in a county with consolidated local government adopted under the Kentucky Revised Statutes. So they're trying to take what's under that and make it reflect what they want to do, and we're going to try to reason our way as to why as we get through this particular piece. Now, what I want to say to you is that there is obviously a political effect to this particular piece. The elected board is restricted. Now, follow this. I'm going to walk you through this because I think it's very important for you to hear this, because it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Maybe it makes a lot of sense to you. You'll see. So here's what they do. First of all, or not second, maybe third, they delegate authority to the superintendent over the district's day-to-day operations. It doesn't sound bad, does it? I mean, he's the one that's there, he's the one that has to do that, and implementation of the board-approved strategic plan. So that makes sense to a degree, but really what they're doing there is transferring operational control to the superintendent. See, because outside of that, a school board can stop him in his tracks. They have to do what the school board votes to do, the majority of the school board determines going to be. But what they're doing is shifting that over for operational control, transportation, personnel decisions, contracts, administrative structure, etc. The whole ball of wax, well, not the entire ball of wax, but a significant part of that. Then they want to limit board meetings. Does that make sense? They want to limit board meetings. The elected board is restricted from meeting more than once every 4 weeks for administrative approvals. Think about that. They're gonna tie their hands, limit their ability to come together to take care of the work that has to be done. This reduces routine oversight and real-time responsiveness. That's what that's about. Then they want to narrow board role to strategic oversight, approving a rolling 3-year strategic plan, approving the annual budget, overseeing annual audits and student performance reviews, and hiring, reviewing, and dismissing the superintendent. So what does that mean? The board becomes primarily strategic, fiscal, and evaluative. Not in the operational sense, not controlling the outcomes, not putting programs into place necessarily with respect to that. Then they go into superintendent gains board administrative authority. We spoke of that. The superintendent shall supervise, control discipline, control employment, manage business, and if he's doing it in a way that's not suitable to the board, I mean, the board can't really intercede directly in that process. They just have to fire somebody and go through a process for doing that. They retain that piece, but significantly, notwithstanding any law that assigns an administrative duty, that means that the superintendent has it. The board does not. So that moves them out of an area of functionality that you would expect, you would want the board to oversee or step in where it's important for them to do so. So this is the core shift in the way it's governed. That clause does 2 major things. The one that really gets me, it creates a default rule. That's the piece I'm talking about. If the law does not explicitly give the board authority, the superintendent has it. So that means it strengthens the superintendent's role further with respect to that. Well, supermajority is required to override superintendent policies. So now it's like what? A simple majority. You know what that is. So now they're talking about it's got to be a 2/3 vote. You know how difficult that can be, particularly if people come from different areas. But you know, there might be a different thing happening there because sometimes when you limit somebody's authority, they come together because it's the only way they can express it. We have to see how that plays out. So it requires a supermajority to deny policies being implemented and adopted by the superintendent with respect to that. Expanded financial authority for the superintendent. They expand the authority of the superintendent to spend or make purchases for $250,000. Now think about that. He's getting more latitude in how to use those funds to support whatever he's doing. And it makes sense if you want to give him that power and authority. It's consistent with that particular piece. So what we have here is a really significant change in terms of how this system works. And when governance is weakened, families have fewer levers to pull and problems persist. That's why we have more people in the process by a democratically elected process. And yes, they squabble. That's how we squabble in the legislature. That's how we do business. We squabble all the time. But the reality is, in that situation and in the situation where we operate, actually we agree on most things. A lot of people see us catfighting all the time. That's what they put on the press. But about 90% of what we do, we agree about. Think about that for a minute. 90%. That includes the budget with respect to that. However, because there's a majority, we have a adversarial system, you know, we have a 2-party system, it's really set up to function that way. And that's what happens there. Of course, now, there's a story about that too as it becomes an issue regarding Metro Council. That's another story my friend could probably speak to much better than I can. But that's part of the manipulation. We're gonna have to find out why they're doing this. You know, why are they doing this? So we have problems that are strongly tied basically to resources and capacity. I don't know if you followed some of the debate on Senate Bill 1. I spoke on that particular piece, And basically, I cut through at least I consider myself cutting through all the smoke and mirrors and going to the real issue. And it's really that we have not kept up with inflation in the system. The dollar per dollar thing, it looks like we're really doing a great thing. But it's really smoke and mirrors, the way they have reconstructed the budget and put more money into the process, yet that money does not reflect the rise in inflationary valuations. What that means is $1 on a given day back in the past, don't ask me today, we like to compare it with 2008 and some other days. Hey, is my 20 minutes almost gone? This is terrible. I'm gonna speed it up. Those dollars now might be, and I'll just pull a number out of the air, worth about 63%. 60 cents instead of $1. You follow what I'm saying? So that dollar doesn't go as far as it goes. So what does that mean? When there's inflationary pressures, you're paying more for the same thing, you get less in terms of overall things that you need. That's what they have done in our school system. The legislature has underfunded the school system. That's what has happened. And it's been done, I get a little political here, under the watch of the Republicans. Because they have been in control for a long time doing this kind of work. So that doesn't mean the Democrats were blameless in the past, because I think some decisions made back then could have been done better, but this particular piece I'm talking about right here, I handed over primarily to my good friends that try to run from that issue. So that in a nutshell, it's much more complex than I'm saying here. I raise all this to say this is a primary issue, but it doesn't stand by itself. Now I'm going to jump over some good things I think we did, because I want to focus on the bad things, because those are the things that can hurt us. There's also a bill called Senate Bill 152. And Senate Bill 152 is a Senate bill that eliminates SBDMs. You know what SBDM is? This is a site-based decision. Thank you. They run the schools in terms of policies at the site of the school, primarily. What they want to do here is they want to eliminate that direct involvement, which brings parents, teachers, and administrators into association with each other to make these decisions about what's good for that school, because schools are different from school to school, and they want to make them advisory. So I'm just going to say that in simple terms. So you can draw your conclusions from that, but it fits hand in glove, if you stop and think about it, with Senate Bill 1. Are you saying?
Bless you.
Going further, there's Senate Bill 114. What does Senate Bill 114 do? I talked about what they do with superintendents. Senate Bill 114, the mayor, this bill says the mayor has the right to make 4 appointments on an expanded 11-person board. The mayor. That inserts what? Another layer of political involvement in that particular process. Why? And the board will elect the superintendent. I wonder what happens if you take those 4 that the mayor, I'm not talking about this mayor, I'm talking about any mayor. You take that 4, let's see, it's 11 people on the expanded board. You make 4 political appointments there. Let's see, what does it take to get to a majority? Or what does it take to get even to a 2/3 vote? You see, 4 from where? The East End somewhere? Somewhere get together? You know how it plays. She'll talk about that to you later, because she knows how it works. So, but my point is, you can see what they're doing, playing the politics with the thing. This is the education. That bill and these bills are huge in terms of what can happen in our community. I want to draw that to your attention. So we're still dealing with that. That bill's now, Senate Bill 1's over in the House, Senate Bill 114 hasn't come up yet, but who knows what's coming out of the House. House is a strange place, that's all I can say. So, let me go further. Affordable housing. You know we have a housing crisis. We've had it for a long time. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So here you have more bipartisanship, because everybody's getting hurt. People in the rural areas are getting hurt. They don't have the infrastructure. There's different things that they don't have that they have to deal with, what they have to do in terms of the economy. See, a lot of people see housing as a place to live. Well, of course it is. But it's more than that. It's a workforce consideration. It has an economic development or economic aspect to that. Because guess what happens? People who live in those houses have to do what? They have to get to work, perform in those contexts, and then, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's more than that when you have shortage of housing. How do you get to work? Are you in proximity to the work, et cetera? So the fact of the matter is that we come together on much of this. However, you have to understand what the dynamics are. I was on the task force, the housing task force. Now, I used to be primarily, in the real estate area, a closing attorney. I did that for years. I know the closing stuff. I represented a national organization of folks that did real estate for about 12 years, but guess what? This is over my head. I had to go in there and learn this stuff. This is a different ball game when you start talking about this sort of thing. I started learning things about shortages and what caused housing shortages that I had not put on my plate. I had to go to school, and I went to school.
That's
It's my
right.
job to know. So I went to school and I got deeper into this thing. I began to realize, whoa, hold up. Why are all these developers on this task force that I'm on? You see, because developers are driving, they're saying, here's what we need for you to do in order for us to meet this housing shortage. Okay, that's fair. Somebody's got to get paid to build houses. I get it. No problem. Problem is, though,
Okay.
what is the outcome? Who benefits and who loses? What happens in your neighborhood? What happens in what part of town doing what? So some of this stuff that they came up with is pretty good. I believe we need a fully funded affordable housing trust fund. We've never stepped up to the plate on that. I'm all for that. You'll see me talking loud and hard on issues like that. We need to do that. But guess what happens when we start talking about, let's eliminate, I tell you what, if it's a 3-story house, or a 4-story building, or an apartment building, let's just have one set of staircases out of it instead of the 2 that brings safety, a modicum of safety when you have high-level structures. They want to eliminate one of them because it saves costs. Well, does it save lives? So what I'm saying, it has consequences. These decisions that are being promoted out of this same task force. I got to tell you, and we're not just talking about that particular issue as it relates to this task force, because there are some good things that are in here. Because they are also emphasizing on infrastructure development. You know, all this stuff you take for granted, water coming out of the spigot and all that sort of stuff, that's infrastructure stuff. Sewers, you know the story. In urban areas in particular, and in some rural areas, you have decaying structures. So if you're going to deal with this issue, you got to invest in these structures. So the question is how you invest in these structures is very important. Because what you don't want to happen is for it to come back and the payment of this is so intrusive on your ability to carry on your everyday life that, in other words, the way they set up the repayment structure, somebody's got to pay for it. Some system has to, and this stuff's not for free, you know that. But how you do it makes a difference in who pays and who covers it. So I'm raising this because that is something that only one bill has been filed. Oh, they're also talking about how those little houses, those little blank places in between houses and those other places that have to come down. What's going to fill those slots? So they're talking about changing the character of those houses, using some other methodologies and filling those gaps in terms of the houses. The question is, do the structures change the character of the neighborhoods, for instance? You got to take in consideration of what's happening to the people who live in the neighborhoods. So yes, transparency, these kinds of things are things I push. The engagement and involvement of people in this process. I'm gonna give you one that's kind of tricky in the back of my mind. it's really tricky because they got a piece in there also, it's another bill, unrelated to this, that says, hey, we can take, okay, no, I don't want nobody beat me up on this now. Promise? Promise? The churches
All right,
can do what they want
all right.
on their property, regardless of what you're talking about. In other words, all the rules that maintain the continuity of the neighborhood,
Okay.
that becomes an issue. I'm not saying that'll happen, I'm saying that the way we do that, that could happen. And God knows, I love churches. Raymond's always trying to get me to come to church. So my point is that we can't, when somebody says church and we roll over, oh, it's a church, they do good as they do up. Well, guess what? Maybe, maybe not. It depends on whether what they're trying to do clashes with the continuity of the neighborhood, et cetera, et cetera. I only raise that to say that even though they put something out there that sounds good,
All right.
does not mean the outcome will be good. All of these things need to be scrutinized. All of them, with respect to that. And my job is to bring that issue to you. I'm gonna get to my last piece, because Raymond's gonna maybe sit down. And that's the budget. 5 minutes. The budget is the most serious thing we deal with. It's the only thing we're constitutionally required to do. We have to produce a budget every year, and it's gotta be balanced. I would say balanced. But the fact of the matter is, it is very serious. Because not only are we dealing with taxpayers' monies, fees that we collect, federal monies that's dedicated to certain projects and initiatives, and monies from other sources, that's obvious. We have to handle that properly, correct? But the fact of the matter is that when we deal with this budget, we have conflicting and combating objectives in that process. So it becomes very difficult. That's compounded by what's happening on the federal level. The federal level is actually impacting our budgets. It's impacting our Medicaid budget. You know what I mean by that, don't you?
Yeah.
In other words, the percentage of the match that we're gonna pay is gonna be much more because of that big ugly bill that they passed some time ago. There are subsidies in the process now that affect our health insurance structures that's going to drive up and already is driving up costs of health insurance. And it's not just the people in the programs that benefit from Obamacare, for instance, but from those that are outside of it. It gets into the whole infrastructure of how health insurance, that is an issue that's impacted. Who's going to pick that up? Who do you think's going to pick that up? You're going to pick it up.
Little people.
You see, you're going to pick up some part of that, along with the inflationary costs, things that are going on with respect to that, and with the great needs and the shift of wealth from those who need it more to those who don't need it at all, quite frankly. I probably ought to give some back because they took it the wrong way. But my point is that that's the environment we're living in. I'm going to stop right there. You got 2 minutes to answer, for me to answer a question. Do I have 2 minutes? They want the job.
Yeah.
Well,
I have a question
Yes.
about Senate Bill, I think it's 202 with Fayette County. I think they're kind of doing something to or with their board. Can you enlighten us a little bit how, I guess, they're attacking both school boards? Both schools are ran by minority superintendents. They're coming out at them both through different bills, but it affects.
you know, it's really interesting. I'll start back into that.
Okay.
Reggie Thomas, who is my Senate caucus leader out of Lexington, got up and argued, a wonderful argument, against that bill. I mean, he was professional. He brought his lawyer skills to the table you'd be proud of. And I said, Reggie, you gonna handle that? You roll with that, fine. But they were so nasty.
Oh, my.
Something I had not even seen, but rarely on the floor of the legislature, that I had to get up. So I got up, And I sort of berated them a little bit about, I've seen this kind of behavior here, what is this institution coming to? What responsibility I did that thing on them, right? Shut them up. And they shut up. And then the Senate president afterwards comes to me and says, in my ear, that racial thing you raised. I said, well, I didn't hear Reggie Thomas raise a thing about race, and I certainly didn't. I talked about behavior. What are you talking about? So I knew he was setting something up, so I went around and talked to everybody else, Republican and Democrat. No, you did a wonderful job. Okay, fine. I went back and said, well, everybody said I did a wonderful job. That's how tricky they get when that race thing was underneath the elephant in the room. You got to ask yourself, and they certainly were, they leaped right into where my head they thought it was, because those two black guys doing this work. I think it's more complex than that.
There's more complex.
It's not as simplistic as that, okay? But I can never throw that out the window. You're a fool if you throw that out the window, right? Now, what's happening is that they are the political situation that's going on in Lexington. From what I understand, the school systems run well. They came up short on some money. They do that. They did it right here. You didn't see them jump on the superintendent here on that particular issue, did they? Now, he owned up and said, we're going to suck it up and do what we got to do, and you may agree or disagree, but the fact of the matter is they cleaned up what they did in Lexington. They kept coming at this guy, trying to oust him. But what's unique about that situation, what raised my eye, were some of our allies on the Democratic side were in the forefront of that. So that made that a tricky, sticky. So what they're trying to do is compromise, really squeeze out. And Senate Bill 114, you say 202, but 114 is the one you got to really watch.
Right.
Is they're trying to squeeze out and take control away in that particular area, as it not only deals with principles, but they're going to extend some of these other things they don't do in Senate Bill 1 to Lexington, because Senate Bill 1 actually deals with Jefferson County, JCPS. What I'm going to do, though, before I leave here, because it's a complex issue, is I'm going to tell you how to reach me, and I'm going to give you more complex stuff so you can bring it back. You remember? So you can bring it back here and do a better job than I'm doing.
Question.
Yes.
The House Bill 607 that deals with Ethics Commission, and it regulates what Metro Council can and cannot do now moving forward. They want to change the Ethics Commission and make sure that there's so many Democrats, so many Republicans that serve, and they're mandating how we can use the Ethics Commission, or whether or not we can go outside and use other counsel. Do you have any update on that?
I know.
Just recently filed.
It hasn't come to us yet, so that's one we're not. But I do want to speak to you. The real issue, I think, beyond that, is the fact that I have to get partisan here because it was a partisan action. The Republicans in Jefferson County are using the rest of the legislature to advance their agenda.
Oh, yes.
And to advance their agenda, they have directly compromised Metro Council by eliminating the partisan element while they exercise partisanship.
Correct.
Now think about that.
Yeah.
So they're doing that here now in very directional. That's also what they're doing with JCPS. I told you, why are they doing that? Well, I'll tell you why they're doing that. Thank you for that question. Because in JCPS, what they're doing and what they do is they come and they meet. I'm telling you, I'm talking about those 5 are their emissaries. I can call them by name, if you make me. But my fact of the matter is, they sit down with the principal in the little room in the principal's office and tell them what should be done and why haven't you done this, why haven't you done that. And by the way, what's that appropriation you need from us? And that's a veiled threat sort of thing. And so what do? They modify and lean on those guys. That's how they control. And that's what that whole thing about Senate Bill 1 is really about, is eliminating that Metro Council, not the Metro Council, that board, right? They're compromising governance so that they can come in and more directly influence the process through the superintendent who has control of that process. Think about that for a minute. Now I'll come back and report on that periodically. Let me say this back to your question. This piece, the piece regarding the Metro Council. By eliminating the adversarial aspect of Metro Council, what they're hoping to do, and the big question is whether they compromise that or whether the individuals on that council come together intentionally and make decisions intentionally to bypass that particular piece. In other words, operate as they operated before. I don't think it's possible.
It's the Republicans that are on the council that's driving that.
Absolutely.
So,
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, no, there's not enough forces on the council to bypass anything.
Well, how many Democrats are on it? How many,
There's
if
13
you had,
Democrats and 12 Republicans.
right, hear what I
We've lost
said?
so many
Say it
seats
again.
over here.
Say it again.
12
13, 12.
Republicans and 13 Democrats.
Is that a majority?
Absolutely. One,
It's a
but you
majority.
need 14 votes to pass anything.
Got you. So they've compromised you, correct?
Well, guess who?
So what,
got 14
so guess
votes?
what, I don't want to make it, you have to make a decision in that environment, I'm not there, so I can't get to that. But what I am saying is, if the other side's got 13 and you got 12, let's say.
No,
you're-
no, they got-
No, listen to
13.
what I'm saying. If they had 13 and you have 12, which means you're in a minority, what do you have to do?
Well, you go.
Well, I'm not asking you, this is.
That's what they're doing.
Let me finish, because he's gonna kick me out of here, I'm telling you, he'll do it, I know him. No, what I'm saying is that means you come together.
No.
Wait, I'm not talking to you. It's not a debate between you and me. Let me have my room. You gotta let me go.
I'm just.
All right, let me go. Please let me go. What I'm saying to you is, that's when you come together, where I operate. Now, Metro Council is not where I operate, so she can talk about that much better about those dynamics and how they work and how they don't work. I'm just talking about from my experience. But from my experience, you come together. May not be able to come together, because 2 or 3 of those pieces may make it impossible to come together. See, I don't know that. That's what I want to say for you. So here's my point. My point is, they are being intentional about Metro Council. They've been intentional about the mayoral. They took that piece out as well. They're intentional about JCPS, and there are several other entities in Jefferson County in particular that they're using the rest of the state to investigate and compromise, including that merger thing where they can shift that money from out of the central district out to this other area, etc. They're finding that some of the stuff is a little more complex than, so they adjusted their stuff and prioritized this and do it a different way. But they're coming. They're here. It does not have to end up bad. Something my daddy told me when I was 14 years old. He said, son, when you are facing a challenge and it looks like things are changing not to your favor, he said, don't sulk. He said, every circumstance offers an opportunity.
All right.
Look for the opportunity.
Good wisdom.
Redefine your objectives. This is me talking now. And you structure yourself and your energy to achieve those objectives. Otherwise, what do? You roll over and die, you become part of the waves that splash against the shores that you cannot control. This is not a condemnation or a criticism. This is a fact of history. This is a fact of life. And you can't win everything on your terms all the time.
That's right.
You have to restructure and go, but you never roll over and die. You don't do that.
One more question.
One more, I get one more.
One more question.
And that's my champion over there. She tell me to do something, I do it. I'm saying that.
Here's my question, much broader. Are we going to have midterm elections?
I think we'll have midterm elections. I think the big trouble's gonna be is that they're gonna try to compromise, they're gonna try to keep people from coming to cast their ballot. They're gonna try to compromise it by intimidation and other mechanisms that compromise people's willingness to show up, whether it's fear or whatever it is. Not everybody has the same degree of intentionality as you have in this room. They have other things they do. They live in a life every day, you know? They have struggles every day. You know it better than I do. But my point is that I think that's what will happen. I have no crystal ball. That's what I think will happen. There's just too much history, too much leverage that they would have to overcome, I think, to do that. That's my assessment.
Very good, son.
Am I out? Told you, keep me out.
I look around the room and I see several new faces, or faces I haven't seen before. If this is your first meeting, raise your hand. Will you please stand up and say who you are?
My name is Chanel Thompson. I'm with the city of Shapley. I'm a councilwoman currently for the city of Shapley, and I'm running for mayor of Shapley as well.
Good evening. My name is Diogenes Miller. Everybody calls me Aji. I am the local president of Local 3310 here in Louisville, Kentucky.
Recognize the council person, Crane, who has been a member of the NAACP for years, but also a voice for reason, a voice for the community, and she stands her ground.
Yeah.
And I read your article yesterday. I read it every week to let you know that. But again, welcome to here. Next item on our agenda is approval of the minutes. Those minutes were sent out with the notice of the meeting. They have a motion to approve the minutes.
I move the motion that we approve the minutes as presented.
It's been moved and seconded that the minutes be approved. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? The minutes stand approved. And we now move to reports, and first up is the treasurer's report.
Thank you, Mr. Burris. I will be brief. Treasury report for February 16th. Our account balances is as such. In our operating account, we have $39,515.35. In our special account, we have $35,616.51. And our scholarship fund is currently at $9,773.41. With an explanation. If you look at your income, the Louisville Housing Authority donated $1,000 to NAACP, and that was for our volunteer work that we engaged in. We are helping them doing their balloting, and they in turn donated $1,000. And Dr. Marshall indicated that $1,000 is going to our scholarship fund. So once we make that adjustment, the scholarship fund will be at $10,773.41. In terms of income, our majority income in the last month has been memberships, as you can see on the list. And we had one entry of $250 for the Freedom Fund. I think the Freedom Fund got done now. But the majority income it has been from memberships. We had the activity at St. Stephen's, which was NAACP Sunday, and that raised a great deal of money. In terms of expenses, we paid our usual expenses, LG&E, a copier, phone service, Spectrum, and we have not paid our rent for February, which was pending. Any update on that, Madam President?
President's report. This is the treasurer's report. He'll do the president's.
Okay, good. Thank you. So that's my report.
Are there any questions for the treasurer? If not, can I have a motion to receive the treasurer's report?
So moved.
Second.
It's Been moved and seconded, the treasury report be received. All those in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries and treasury report is approved. We now move to the secretary's report.
Secretary's report, 639 members. There are 20 memberships that are in a batch to be processed. Our membership is going to fluctuate as people expire every day. I want to keep mentioning until March the 1st that our life memberships will go up. And if you are a fully paid silver member, your opportunity to get the gold at the grandfathered rate of $1,500, you have to have a payment in of $150 by March the 1st. And if you are a fully paid gold member, your opportunity to move up to Diamond Life has to be made by March the 1st of a minimum payment of $250.
As to the treasurer's and president's sales force, and looking at it before the meeting started tonight, there were 231 adult members, meaning annual adult members. So there were 200, but that doesn't tell you how many were new. It just tells you how many's in the system. And in the system, at least at 4 something, we had a total of 625, I think, was listed on it.
Is that from January to this February?
It's what is current at that point in time.
Okay.
Okay, as Kelly was explained several times, membership, people pay memberships at different times and they expire. And so we have a group that drop off, a group that comes on, and so it fluctuates all the time. But we're just trying to get better information to be able to track. You know, I can remember when I first came back and was involved, we had over 700 members listed, and we're down to 625 now. So there's some things we got to do. And when you talk about 231 annual members in Louisville, to me that's abysmal. You know, we're a community where we probably ought to have at least 1,000 members, and so we got to work on it. We got to work, but that's where we are. So with that, can I have a motion to receive the secretary's report?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, the move second treasurer's report secretary's report be received. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? And treasurer's report is received. Now we move to the president's report, which is not going to be long tonight. The senator was long-winded, so I'm not going to keep it a long time. But he was good. Let me tell you something. One of the things, and he talked about the work that he and Reginald Thomas did. You won't believe the battles that they had fighting in terms of what's going on. And they're not bashful about getting up on the floor, expressing opinions and doing that. So I think we got to be very, very appreciative for them in terms of those things they're doing. JCPS, I guess, really adopted back, I guess, in earlier January. No, it was in December. A budget that was, in fact, a balanced budget, preliminary budget to be sent to state, and that was, in fact, done last week, or at least on Saturday. Friday night, Saturday morning, Friday night, they adopted the reorganization for the administrative office, central office, in terms of, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail because I put Michelle on the agenda. And
Surprise, surprise.
She knows. You read the agenda, you know I was coming in. But I think where we are as it relates to JCPS, there are a lot of moving parts in terms of what's going on. Who all is impacted, we don't know. It changes from day to day. There are some people who said, this morning I came in and told me I was all right. And then when I got to go home, they told me I didn't have a job anymore. So they're working on trying to right size. When you're facing a budget deficit, you know, you can't print money, they don't have that ability, so you got to make hard decisions. And every decision that you make offends one group or a secular group, and so as a result of you make enough decisions, you offend them all, and they come for you. But what we've got to do is to stay focused on what is most important to us, and that is the academic achievement of students who primarily look like us. And we got to make sure that they're taken care of and that they get the support that they need. And I'll leave it, stop there and let Michelle pick up for that. The next thing I want to talk about is tomorrow evening at Newburgh Community Center. The community, the monitoring company that is monitoring the community commitment. Everybody know what the community commitment is, don't you? Okay. So when DOJ came to town and investigated Louisville 2 years ago, whatever, what they found were problems and issues, and what they could put forward was a consent decree, which they thought would be adopted and enforced by a court of law. My fellow Senator College graduate, who doesn't know his from whatever, decided while sitting on the bench that he didn't want to enforce this consent decree. So the city and the mayor and the police chief signed a document called the community commitment, which was they took bits and pieces from the consent decree and said, this is what we're going to implement. One of the parts of the consent decree was having an independent monitor to monitor the implementation and the follow-through on the consent decree appears on the community commitment. That group that is effective law enforcement, ELA, I think, they will do their first report tomorrow night. This will be the first report, right?
I don't think it's gonna be a report.
It's not a report, it's just a.
I think they're gonna report on their progress.
Well, okay, I would the flyer said first report. So, but anyway, whatever it is, tomorrow night, whatever it is, so whatever it is, tomorrow night at 6 o'clock at the Newburgh Community Center, they will be there to discuss. So I encourage anybody that wants to attend. It's open to the community. So you're able to, if you're able to come and do that. You'll learn more about it in terms of that. One of the things that's also happening, and maybe councilperson can update us, is that some of the pieces of the community commitment is being processed to be codified in the ordinance. I don't know what the status of that is, but where it's going.
Oh, you want me to take?
Yes.
Well, it's in the hands of a council person who is the chair of our government accountability committee. And she's formulating a committee that she's calling a task force to come together to talk about what's in her ordinance of the pieces of the community commitment. So that's all we know at this point. But it's not the codification that most community leaders wanted.
Okay.
It's a stripped down version of that. But the task force can bring it to where it needs to be if that comes to fruition.
Okay. So just understand that the process is still going, still ongoing, still issues in terms of where we are and what is happening. I'll give you 2 data points to say where Louisville is now. If you have been following the news, these spot cameras, or whatever they call them, license plate readers, whatever. If you look at the data of how many hits have occurred in neighborhoods, you find that there seems to be an inordinate impact, a disproportionate impact on communities that are folks that look like us. That's number 1. Number 2, and I probably shouldn't tell you about this, but in the Sunday's courier, the 22nd, there will be an article dealing with the number of stops LMPD has made since the original DOJ report. And I'll leave it at that. Just get prepared for it. So those are the things that are happening, and I want to make certain that the additional thing I want us to also talk about is you heard Clinton give a report on scholarships. He said we're about, what, $8,000 in scholarship raised so far. If you have not, this branch last year gave out over $123,000 in scholarships to students. 123,000. And we've done well probably for the last 10 years. We want to make certain that we continue that, keep that going. So we need, if you haven't donated,
write a check, go online, whatever, and support the scholarship. Scholarship funds are desperately needed to import kids who look like us. These institutions, given what that person who masquerades as the President of the United States has done, has caused to dry up a lot of scholarship support for folks. And we need to make certain that we won't be able to step in the board and replace the millions, but we can replace the hundreds. So let's do that. And with that, the President is open to any questions. Hearing none, to have a motion to receive the President's report.
So moved.
Second. It's moved and seconded that the President's report be received. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? Abstention, the President's report is received. Next, we go to committee reports. Any committee reports that need action? Okay, we'll move on to old business, and on this I have the Education Committee update on JCPS reorganization. You come up, Chris, stay there.
I got a big voice, right? With you, the Education Committee met last Thursday night, which is the night before the board decision on Friday, in terms of reorganization, and a lot has occurred since then as well. As a former principal, I'm linked with a lot of people, and what really surprised me over the weekend was the number of posts being made from people in central office saying, I'm looking for a job. And there are people, a lot of them who look like us, but that was significant. But I want to share with you our closing statement at the end of that meeting on Thursday night from the Education Committee, where most members present were retired principals and had firsthand experience of how these changes would affect. We said the sentiment now is clear. Nothing changes unless something changes. The board got here by not asking the right questions of Dr. Polio. And over several years, the JCPS budget ballooned while students no longer appear to be at the center. Now the board has placed its trust in Dr. Yearwood to fix it without first committing to doing anything differently themselves. He's been handed an incredibly difficult problem, a short timeline, and a staff that includes people who either wanted his job or are unhappy he got it. And that leaves him in a position of asking, who can I trust? And us wondering, who is he listening to? We are once again down to the wire, being asked to make an immediate decision where payroll and other obligations can be met, but urgency cannot replace accountability. And at some point, the board must use its own moral compass and say enough. It was frustrating deeply that the organizational charts that they came out with, and maybe some of you saw it on news and through social media, it was a mess. The average person could not understand and make comparisons, as opposed to simply showing us what it looked like this year and what it'll look like next year. And so when that's done, it would have allowed the public to clearly see the changes, but without it, confusion remains, and it raises concern about whether the savings are substantial as claimed. And then on Friday night after the board meeting, there were a number of reports on television that were very troubling about, again, people in that position who are not happy he's in it or wanted it themselves, to be quite honest. And so that is really surfacing, and you can expect a lot more, unfortunately, negativity and inappropriate comments probably to be made over the next several months as people who lost their jobs and have an axe to grind don't continue to inform the superintendent of what's really happening in the district. From our perspective, the main thing is to keep the main thing, which is academic achievement. We do not see a clear rationale for those cuts to improve student outcomes, and we're still concerned about King Elementary and what's going to happen to those students. In particular, who have already faced another school closing when Young closed without even a word, and now those kids are forced to move. So some of those elementary kids have now been in 2 different schools, in as many years and are now going into their third school. And these are low-performing academic schools. So they're not leaving a low-performing school to go to a higher-performing school. They're going to schools that are just as low-performing as they are. So that's a concern. So we believe the deeper cut should occur in central office, but students should remain our priority. Finally, this is not Dr. Yearwood's burden by itself. Responsibility rests with every current board member, and leadership requires transparency, courage, and real change, not business as usual. On Tuesday night, one of the board members raised the possibility, or one of the speakers had raised the possibility of legal action for financial neglect. And we wrote in the comment, it was a reminder that accountability doesn't just apply to the past. If nothing changes, it applies now. We wanted to send a really strong message that we expect the board to support the superintendent, but to ask tough questions and to get the right answers. So we're continuing to meet and try to bring some institutional knowledge, background support to Dr. Yearwood because he has none. And he came into a position, again, if you don't hear anything else, there were the people who worked closest to him, many of them wanted his job, interviewed for his job, did not get that job. And so then they come in and have to work with those folk. They're not giving him all the information he should have to make appropriate decisions. Simple things like, with the King closure, did they even let him know that Young right down the street had closed last year? No. He didn't know that when those kind of decisions were made. So always keep that in mind. We need to be supportive and at the same time hold not only him but the board accountable.
That's right.
All right. Any questions, you guys? Yes, sir.
It seems to me that Dr. Goodwood, he's put in a tough position making decisions, whether it's good or whether it's bad. But the case to me seems more important is to have transparency in the decisions that he's making. That to me is the most important, especially for other people on the outside. If we can understand and see what decisions he's faced with, it helps us understand more of what's going on. If it's only the transparency to me is very important.
I'd agree with the communication piece, transparency, and that's one of the things that we are working with him very closely on. As a community, as a committee, education committee, Dr. Burson, we've met several times, President Burson, with him to provide that extra support. Because right now, it really is about who can you trust? Who is telling you these things? How to get your message out? Who do you communicate with in the media? Where do you need to go? Where do you need to be seen so that people hear what is exactly going on? How do you control the narrative instead of what's happening now, which is media is pretty much controlling it themselves? Yeah. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
So as we talk about accountability for the board, what types of ideas are, I'm in HR, so I'm always looking at corrective performance, things like that. This board doesn't seem to have any consequences for their lack of leadership for the last couple of years. So what are we doing with it? Because me, I'm kind of like, oh, you all need to resign because you knew what was going on and you had a fiduciary responsibility and you failed. Elected or not, you don't need to be here. But I seem to be kind of in the minority saying
well, it's just a tricky situation because 4 of the board members were elected 2 years ago. And so when the majority of that money was spent and designated, it was 4 years ago. And so you have people on the board who weren't really a part of that decision, but overwhelmingly, we just need to be thinking about who we place in position to be elected for board member, that they have some sort of knowledge. I mean, all of you all on your job sites, if you think about what it's like if somebody were to come in who never worked in your space, who never worked in your building, came in telling you what you should do. And that's pretty much what we have on the board. A lot of people who have never been in public schools, especially in our schools, and don't really have a firm grasp. So they really need to hear from you, because that's another complaint we hear a lot. The board members say, you know, nobody in my district told me how they felt about this issue. So you just have to hold people accountable when you can. But really the best way is when we get to that voting booth, if we vote, which is that question I hate. All right. Yes.
Is any of this deficit, can it be attributed to some of the changes in the current administration, how they've been changing funding for education?
You know, here's the thing. This is everywhere, you all across the United States. School districts, they passed out that COVID money like it was candy. And everybody just started spending on really good things. But nobody asked, hey, when this money's gone, can we still pay the bill? That's what we're dealing with. And it's going to hurt a lot of people, because, again, this is all across the United States. We see every day people are losing, you know, their jobs. And that happened at the federal government with what Trump did when he first came in, laying off those federal employees. And that was the pathway for many black people to get to the middle class. Well, that's the same thing with education. Many of the people in this community are in the middle class and upper middle class simply because they went into education and got paid for it well. But now they're losing their jobs. So that just is going to continue to trickle down. All right? Yes, ma'am.
You said that the students that came are going to go into the third school.
Some of them will be.
Do they know where they're going?
Well, not yet. I think they're working on a plan, and that's what we're going to work with Dr. Yearwood about, is making sure that they have real solid options, and that the community is very much aware of what their choices are, because right now they don't. Initially they were told they could go to a magnet or traditional school, but if you've been in Louisville, you know you've not bumping the line for that process. So we're just going to try to work with them to make sure they get to great schools in our community and are taken care of.
Okay, well, when you said that, before they said something about Malvern Elementary, and with the, will there be, make the classes larger?
Yeah, it's probably between Maupin and Perry, and where most of those kids are gonna go, and yeah, there's none. Yeah. Yeah.
They won't have enough. Will they have enough staff for those?
Yeah, they will, but the classes, you know, right now at Maupin and King both, they probably have like 17, 18, 19, 20 in a class. But now when they combine, they'll be back up to the limits of 24, 28, 29 kids in a class.
I think Atkinson is one for those kids.
Yeah, Atkinson as well. Thank you, Ron. Yes, ma'am.
I just had a comment. As you were reading your documents, your statement, it just felt like poetry to the ear. So I was hoping that your intent is to put it in the Courier Journal or put it in writing somewhere, because people need to read what you just said. Right. That was a great statement.
Thank you.
So
Thank you. Thank you.
What's your last name?
Penix, P-E-N-N-I-X. You know Louise? Everybody know Louise. I just. Yes.
Saturday evening at a social occasion, and I met Miss White. She was there. Delightful young lady. He is feeling it. He's feeling it. And he not only feeling it at work, but he's feeling it at home. She shared some things with me that, and Kim was there. And so Kim got to commiserate, because Kim went through some of the same crap. But I think what we have to do is as the statement says, the main thing has to be the main thing. And that is making certain that academic achievement
is first and foremost and supported in everything that is done. And in the process, you're what needs us. You know, they're sniping at his heels. There's one reporter who works for a station, I think they call it WDRB, that every opportunity she gets, she snipes at him. We gotta be supportive. And that doesn't mean that we don't say some things, that we don't criticize things that he's done and say we need to change that. We can be supportive while still supporting the things that we want to see happen. And that's where we gotta be. And that's where we will be.
Haven't I heard him say that he doesn't want that responsibility of all those?
I tell you, what he did was really masterful in testifying. And frankly, they asked him about the bill, and he told them, I don't want all that. I don't want all that. And I think the committee chair in particular got shocked.
Very good.
But he was very honest with that.
Something else he said, which I was so thankful he said, because people have short memories and they try to make up stories. He said, this was not my issue. I did not know about this deficit before I took the job. But some people are trying to pin it on him. That's why I think we need to speak up when we hear that narrative.
You know, the Louisville business community were big supporters of the fair-haired boys, a man that was in that position prior to Yearwood. And they have not rallied and come around. They're sort of, you know, slinking and doing all those things. But that's the reason why our community and us have got to be supportive. And, you know, he's open and he'll share. You know, he'll share with you. One of the things that he did say last night, and I may be premature in saying this, is that they're in fact trying to operate a job fair with local businesses, invite them in to bring in everybody whose job is being eliminated to in fact see if there are other places in Louisville where they can be employed. So, you know, what he's doing, he's not uncaring, folks. You know, I know some folks who, you know, slash and bang and do all this stuff, never blink or whatever. I can tell you, he loses sleep over it. But he's got a job and he's got to get that budget in line. And so, tough decision. I'll stop. Any other old business? Any new business? Any announcements? Yes, Gary.
I wanted to just bring to everyone's attention, the Derby City Cruise